Okay, my name's Lucy Evans, and I have been leading this project. For attending this workshop on using spoken word poetry and theatre in gender-based violence prevention work with young people. And for those of you who are teachers or youth educators, I want to start just by thanking you for taking time out of the important work that you do to be here today, and I hope that you'll find it useful. The other thing, just before I start, I want to do a very brief content warning. So the session today will involve discussions of forms of gender-based violence, such as child sexual abuse, domestic violence, family violence. So if you need to leave or if you need to take some time out, then please feel free to do that. So before we talk more about the resource that we're launching today, the teaching resource, I want to say just a little bit about the broader research project that it was part of. So this project, the title was Representing Gender-Based Violence, Literature, Performance and Activism in the Anglophone Caribbean. So the project ran from September 2021 to January 2024. Its focus was developing arts-based strategies for addressing the significant public health issue of gender-based violence, or GBV. And it was run by an international project team. So it was a collaborative project, the University of Leicester, in collaboration with the University of the West Indies. There were many people involved. In terms of the core research team, we had researchers in Trinidad, Jamaica and the UK, and also partners and collaborators in both Trinidad and Jamaica. The project was youth-oriented. It was funded by the UK's Arts and Humanities Research Council, so UK government funding. And the research team was based in the 3 different countries. I was project lead. I was based in the UK, so I'm based at the University of Leicester. Kelsey Delaney, who will be speaking in a minute, was also based at that point at the University of Leicester. We also had Gabrielle Hosein leading the work that was happening in Trinidad, and Sonia Stanley-Nair was leading the work taking place in Jamaica. We had researchers in those countries as well. As I've tried to indicate here in my diagram, there was kind of crossover between the work that was happening in the different countries. So Amilcar Sanatan was a researcher based in Trinidad, but he was supporting the work happening in Jamaica. Kelsey was based in the UK, but was supporting the work happening in Trinidad. And in fact, all of us worked together on co-authoring publications and working together on the activities across the national boundaries. So I mentioned the researchers involved in the project. There were also project partners, the Oral Tradition Roots Foundation, TT, that's here today and you'll be hearing from later. Roots Foundation is a youth-oriented organisation based here in Trinidad that focuses on developing the use of spoken word to generate social change. So the Roots Foundation's interests and expertise really aligned closely with what we wanted to do on this project. So it was a really important partnership for the project. In Jamaica, we worked with Tribe Sankofa, a performing arts organisation, and we also had as a partner Bocas Lit Fest, Trinidad and Tobago's annual literary festival. You can see the Roots Foundation team on the picture on the right here, at San Juan North Secondary School where they were working. And then on the bottom left, you can see Fabian Thomas, who runs Tribe Sankofa with some of the students at Bridgeport High School. We also had other collaborators. Importantly, we had teachers. There was a Form 1 teacher at San Juan Government Secondary School. There were also teachers at the schools in all of the 3 schools in Jamaica where the work was happening, and guidance counsellors as well. And that support from the teachers was really crucial in enabling this work to happen. Also really important is the active participation from students at all 4 of the schools, and also youth group members in Trinidad, because the first set of workshops was with a group of people drawn from the youth groups that Roots Foundation works with. We also had psychologists involved. This was really important as part of our management of the very significant ethical considerations required on this project. So we had psychologists in both countries supporting the work that was happening in the schools and making sure that people participating had the right kind of support. We also had other creative practitioners involved in this project. So the dancehall artist Cecile was involved in the workshops in the schools in Jamaica. Shivani Ramlachan, an acclaimed Trinidadian poet, was involved in a different element of the project that I'm not talking about today, where we created a fiction and poetry anthology. So there were many people involved, kind of offering different things to the project. And I talk a little bit later about kind of how the process of collaboration worked and how we worked together. Before I do that, I wanted to just say a little bit about the context and the rationale for the project and what our aims were. So gender-based violence refers to any act that's perpetrated against a person's will and is based on gender norms and unequal power relationships. A 2021 World Health Organization study presents GBV as a major public health crisis affecting nearly 1 in 3 women globally. And adolescents have been identified as an age group with a heightened vulnerability to GBV, both in the Caribbean and globally. And Gabrielle will be talking in more depth about that particular context of GBV as it impacts young people in Trinidad. So this informed our decision to work with young people on this project. Research on GBV prevention has emphasized the importance of community-level interventions with young people, and there's growing evidence that arts-based interventions offer an effective means through which to address sensitive topics such as GBV, particularly when working with young people. So there's been some research coming out about this over the last few years. People are looking at how creative modes, particular art forms, can be used really productively in this context of kind of dealing with sensitive issues with particular kind of community groups. And so with all this in mind, our aims on the project and the aims that relate to the work that was done specifically in Trinidad, firstly were to develop an arts-based approach to GBV education for young people that draws on Caribbean literary and performance traditions. So we wanted to work with art forms that were kind of had particular significance in these countries and in the region, and use those as part of this model of GBV prevention work with young people. So in doing this, we were looking to empower young people to explore, understand, and speak out against gender-based violence using these art forms, so using spoken word poetry and theatre. And Kelsey will be saying a little bit more about why spoken word poetry and drama in particular was the art form that felt appropriate for this work. So I've just outlined some of the activities and outputs here from the project that relate specifically to the work done in Trinidad. So there were 2 series of workshops facilitated by the Roots team. The first of them that involved work with youth groups. They were participants drawn from youth groups that Roots had already worked with, and they were aged 13 to 17. The second set of participants were students at San Juan Government Secondary School in Trinidad, and they were aged 11 to 14. During this process of the workshops, a spoken word play was created, The Free Period, which we will be looking at later on in this session. Also, we created an open access teaching resource, Gender-Based Violence Education for Youth, a Caribbean Arts-based Facilitation Guide. This resource is aimed at secondary school teachers and youth program facilitators, and it's available online. So if you look at your workshop program that you will have been given as you came in, there's a link to this facilitation guide and a QR code. So you can access it now if you're interested, because you should be able to look at it on your phone. The play, The Free Period, is actually embedded within the facilitation guide. So as part of one of the approaches that's outlined for workshop facilitation includes using the play. So they're kind of also suggestions for how to teach using the play and discussion points. So Kelsey will be saying a little bit more about that later. So do take a look at that. The other output was, we worked, and we're still working on scholarly articles documenting the research process, the methodology, and the outcomes. So we'll have some kind of journal articles that document some of the work that was done. So I want to say just a little bit about the process or the model of collaboration that we used on this project. So The play, the facilitation guide, and the arts-based methodology were developed through collaboration between the research team, the Roots Foundation team, the teachers, and the young people who participated. So we were keen to avoid a kind of top-down, hierarchical form of collaboration where academic expertise within the university is kind of taken into community outreach work. We were aware that there's a lot of expertise in many places, so we wanted a form of collaboration that was complex and iterative, involving a lot of dialogue between all of the many people involved in the project, all of whom have different kinds of knowledge and insights to bring to the project. And I think in that respect, the way that we did the project demonstrates the potential of arts-based methods for contesting hierarchies of knowledge and increasing multivocality. I want to just say a little bit about how the model of collaboration worked. I'm using a diagram to try to visualize it. So initially, in the first workshop series, the youth group participants learnt about and discussed the topic of gender-based violence and produced their own spoken word poems on the theme of gender-based violence. The Roots Foundation team then worked with the research team to devise a spoken word play script, The Free Period. And the script was kind of, the spoken word poems were kind of used as a foundation for the script. So the script incorporated a character, Sleepy Girl, and also wording, voices and themes from the poems. And Gabrielle will be talking more about the play script later. Then the Roots team worked with a second cohort of young people at San Juan Secondary School to read, discuss, perform, and develop the script. Following the second series of workshops, the research team and members of Roots worked together to refine the script and draft the facilitation guide, taking on board the students' feedback and responses to the play, and also taking on board some of the things that we had learned in the process of planning and that Roots had, and those people who were running the workshops had learned during that process of delivering the workshops. So I'll just end with a picture of some of the students at San Juan Secondary School performing a scene from the play, The Free Period. So as well as highlighting young people's perspectives on gender-based violence, the project illustrated the important role that they can play in creating tools for its prevention. And this is something we'll be thinking about more later in this morning as we look more closely at the play and think about how it can be used in this way. So now I'm going to hand over to Kelsey, who will talk a little bit more about spoken word, and she's also going to show you the facilitation guide and say a little bit more in detail about how to use it and how it works. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So, thank you. Yes, good morning. So, as Lucy said, I'm Kelsey. I was a research associate on this project, supervised by Lucy in Leicester, but also Gabrielle here in Trinidad. And I'm going to dig into and contextualize why, in the Trinidad strand of this project, we rooted the workshops and the play scripts in spoken word aesthetics and methodologies. And I'm going to approach this question from a few different angles. So, why spoken word in Trinidad? Why spoken word for young people specifically, and why spoken word for GBV education? So apologies, because some of you are very local to here and already know probably some of the things I'm going to say. Some of us have travelled from far afield, so apologies if any of this is kind of old news to any of you here. But spoken word is a popular art form in Trinidad, and one that I think it's important to situate in relation to a whole coalition of other oral and performative traditions from Trinidad, musical genres like calypso and rapso and soca, carnival traditions like robotalk and other forms of speechifying, religious rites and enunciations, as well as theatre and performance. And I'll kind of rein back my academic instincts, but critics like Gordon Roller and Cameron Brathwaite have both written really extensively about how the roots of all those different artistic practices are entangled together. So Thinking now about the present in Trinidad, there's a really thriving spoken word tradition here, and it's a spoken word tradition which is invigorated by young people as well. So that contemporary scene takes precedence from these local and regionally centered traditions of festive and poetic and oral performance. And it's also kind of grounded in some of the US slam poetry models as well. So it's like a kind of mix of those different things. And I've included here on the screen just some images of some of the different spoken word organizations. So with us in the room today, we have Roots Foundation, who was our project partner. We also have the 2 Cents movement. Very local to this campus we're in is UE Speaks, which is the oldest running open mic in Trinidad. And in fact, many of the young spoken word performers have come through that UE Speaks circuit. I've also included here on the screen a picture of Alexandra Stewart. So she won the 2022 First Citizens National Poetry Slam for her piece Anatomy of a Wolf, and that was a piece all about GBV. So I really recommend Googling that and watching the YouTube video because it's a really moving piece of spoken word. But in it, she talks about the devastatingly high numbers of women who annually go missing in Trinidad, and also their kind of like the double standard about how their abusers are hiding in plain sight, walking all around, while these girls and women are missing. So I think suffice to say, spoken word is an art form which has a resonance with young people here because it's familiar and recognizable, and it's also already embedded within young people's creative expression. So that's one of the reasons that we wanted to draw on spoken word in our workshop series. And also spoken word in Trinidad, like other art forms like Calypso, is rooted in political activism and kind of progressive politics. So that's another reason why we work with spoken word. So working with spoken word in this way is part of an arts-based approach to GBV, education, and intervention. So this really hinges around the idea that to end GBV, we need to recognize and challenge and dismantle very long-held and entrenched and pervasive societal attitudes and values. And so interventions with young people, you know, these kind of grassroots, ground-up kinds of work, need to equip young people to safely explore these quite complex dynamics, and also to feel like they are active stakeholders in conversations about GBV. So I think offering a creative platform to young people is really valuable, because that means that young people get to be directly involved in thinking about how GBV gets represented. And they also get to see that their words have the power to reshape our understandings of gender-based violence. So from a research perspective, research on spoken word with young people in kind of education has established that spoken word is actually particularly valuable for working with marginalized young people of color, and young women, because it promotes a horizontal engagement between educators and participants. So there's something about the kinds of conversations in that kind of teaching space in spoken word which promotes a nice kind of horizontal engagement. And also, since spoken word has this tradition of protest within it, it also offers this really valuable means of flipping the script. So there's a focus on language and wordplay, and this is valuable for helping young people develop strategies to decode, subvert, resist, and reinvent those familiar and entrenched dynamics that we were talking about. So since spoken word hinges around performance, it also helps to facilitate youth voices to be amplified, which is important for helping to build self-esteem and to signpost societal agency, as well as modeling a productive and safe means of speaking out and having your voice heard. From a research perspective, and all of us are engaged in doing research about this series of workshops and this guide, youth voices are not frequently heard in conversations about GBV. So I also think it's really important to analyse these artistic responses so that we can deepen our understandings of what young people think and feel about the societies that they live in and the dynamics that they negotiate on a day-to-day basis. And listening to their voices also helps us understand how young people might be more embedded into programs that seek to end GBV. So what I'm going to do now is just talk a little bit more practically about the guide itself, which we're all going to be looking at later. So this is the front cover of our guide. You should all have a QR code on your program so you can download it and see it on a device in front of you. So the guide is intended to act as a manual for facilitators in secondary schools and youth organisations to convene spaces for interventions on ending GBV through the use of spoken word, theatre, and other forms of creative expression. And the guide is designed to introduce workshop facilitators to key concepts around gender and GBV, and to promote collective reflection and conversation so workshop participants can come into their own understanding and feelings around gender and around the idea of ending GBV. So the goal of the guide is to help facilitators and workshop participants feel empowered with the knowledge, resources, and also the community that they need to become change makers. The guide contains two approaches. We're going to be focusing on the first approach in the guide today. This is a more structured approach, which provides a script which is included in the guide for the play, the free period. And the idea is that participants learn and perform this script, and in the guide, there are facilitation questions. So this should be something that whether you have drama experience or not, you can pick up and use in your classroom or your facilitation space. The second approach is more open-ended and involves participants creating their own performance. To support both of these approaches, the guide also has quite a heavy amount of front matter. So we contain information about kind of setting the stage, creating ground rules and expectation for making everybody feel safe and comfortable, guidance around pre and post check-ins, as well as model forms that you can use, definitions of terms, which I'll come back to in just a second, advice about how to give content warnings and also how to handle disclosures if anybody opens up about vulnerable personal experiences in relation to doing this work. And also facilitator self-care, because this is really heavy stuff to engage with, so it's important that you're able to think about yourselves as facilitators. So returning to the definitions, I've just included one as an example on the screen, although I won't read it. So the way we've structured this is we have a definition for the instructor to get kind of you straight on what you're doing, but then also an accessible definition, providing simple terms that can be read out to the participants who you're working with. So later in the session, we're going to be discussing the script in more depth, but ahead of that, I just want to highlight how the structure of this portion of the guide works. So the play is broken down into multiple scenes, and for each scene, our guide contains this information. So there's a background section, which functionally explains what's going on in the scene. There's an overview for the facilitator, which kind of connects what's going on in the scene with the topics of GBV, which the scene is inquiring into. And then there are also a list of facilitation questions to help unpack the scene and explore it with participants. So we're going to be looking at the guide in more detail later, but now Gabrielle is going to offer us some further context on violence in the lives of adolescents in Trinidad and talk about how that informed the themes that came to make up our play. So thank you, everyone.
Morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning. For those of you that are not usually on the UWI campus, let me welcome you on behalf of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies to the campus and to our event today. It's a deeply collaborative one, which is being extended today by you all being here. I'd like to especially welcome the teachers who came today and those from South Trinidad who came. Teachers are really at the core of working with students, and drama teachers in particular are underappreciated in terms of how drama can be used to address a wide range of issues and also introduce students to a wide range of topics. So we're especially pleased to have drama teachers here today. This guide was really created with you in mind. For those of you that don't know, I'm Gabrielle Hosein. I'm Senior Lecturer at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies. The IGDS has a long history of supporting poetry, spoken word, and rhapso. Indeed, the Institute had a rhapso show for International Women's Day in 1999, right on this stage. I was a young rhapso performer in those youthful days. And over the years has continued to support creative approaches to engaging gendered issues, and has also continued to work specifically with spoken word over the last 6 or 7 years. A number of years ago, before the pandemic, the IGDS had been working with the Two Cents movement and had collaborated with them on a play that had outreach to 40 schools. Out of that play, we created a sticker campaign that was characterized by 2 different phrases. One of them was GBV means, and the other phrase was ending GBV means, and we invited students to fill out those responses on stickers and put them everywhere. This was actually part of the originality and contribution of Catherine Chan, who's our in-house artist and media and branding officer, and really takes much of what we do and transforms it into the true public intellectual work of the IGDS. And then the responses that were created by the students from these from the play and the facilitation that followed, such as one of them wrote, for example, GBV means not listening when she says no. Simple phrases that came from students themselves were then broadcast on electronic billboards across the country, on highways, over the course of 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence. And so this project, thanks to the University of Leicester, the partners such as Roots Foundation, Trinidad and Tobago, Tribe Sankofa in Jamaica, the University of West Indies, our colleagues in Mona and others, is a real dream come true in terms of finally creating a toolkit that can continue this work with others. This is not the first toolkit of its kind created by the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, and it additionally furthers the kind of popular pedagogical work that we've been doing. The first toolkits of these kinds were created for the Break the Silence campaign, which is a national campaign to end child sexual abuse and incest, characterized by a blue teddy symbol that has been created and is now quite widely known across the country. And for that, we created a toolkit for arts teachers to enable arts teachers to engage with students about child sexual abuse and to help students to create visual art about that. And that toolkit has now been developed into a bilingual version that focuses on migrant children in collaboration with a range of other partners. And so a long intellectual and activist history of the IGDS has been brought into this project as well. So I'd just like to credit the Institute for the institutional memory that it continues to establish on the campus in terms of how the UWI transforms, helps to shape transformation in the region. What I'm going to do right now is do a very brief review of the context of GBV. This is not all of the data that is available, but it does give you a sense of why it is we chose to focus on the 5 areas that we chose to focus on. The text reads is a little bit small here, but I will read it for you, so it's okay. First of all, in relation to violence against adolescents and children, and these slides are available for anyone who would like them coming out of this workshop as well, so you can also get this to take home. An estimated 58% of children in Latin America and the Caribbean experience sexual, physical, or emotional violence this year. Every year. 58% is, of course, more than half of children, and so I think that suggests why GBV work is so crucial and urgent. A systematic review of violence against children in Latin America and the Caribbean between 2015 and 2021 noted that about 1/3 of children experience physical violence alone, with boys reporting higher rates. But prevalence varies very widely across both studies and countries. And in one Caribbean study published in 2018, involving 1,351 children and adolescents aged 9 to 17 years in Barbados and Grenada specifically, so a little over 1,000 students, more than 17% self-reported experiencing multiple forms of abuse, whether in or out of the family, suggesting that official statistics are much lower than prevalence. This is, of course,